Hello and welcome to our discussions on game theory. Now up till this point we have talked about what a game is. And we saw that game is a competitive situation where one person wins at expense of the other. One person loses and other person gains. We have confined our discussion to two-person zero-sum games. Two-person zero-sum games mean that there will be only two players and the sum of transitions, that is gains and losses, sum of gains and losses, transition from one player to another, losses of one going as gains to other. So, these transitions, sum of these transitions will be 0. So, we will be restricting our discussion to two-person zero-sum games, only two players and they are transitioning from one to another. Whatever I am gaining from the other. If I gain n number of units, it means the other is losing n number of units. If I lose n number of units, it means the other is gaining n number of units. So, there are only two players. So, when I look at the game from one person's perspective, I also get an insight into what is happening to the other player. Fine. So, up till this point we have talked about what a game is. Now, game can be stable or unstable. Stable game is where we get a stable strategy. Yes, there might be initial hiccups, there might be initial switching between the strategies. I might go to A1, A3, A4, A7, A2. There might be initial switching, but after a point of time, I realize that this is the best strategy for me. And beyond a point, I do not switch my strategy. I accept that this is the best possible strategy for me. Same happens with the other player also. So, in stable game, we get a saddle point and we gave up the strategies and value of game. This is what we mean by solution of a stable game. Now, when we get into the unstable games, the problem is that there is no saddle point. So, for unstable games, now a game could be of any size. A game could be of order m by n. What do we mean when I say a game of size m by n or order m by n? It means that the row player R and column player C. How many strategies does R have? 1, 2. He can have up to m strategies. How many strategies does column player have? 1, 2, 3 up to n. So, when I say the game can be of size m by n, row player could have m strategies, column player could have n strategies, we could have any size. But we have restricted ourselves for now. In unstable games, up till last class, we restricted ourselves to 2 by 2. 2 by 2 is 2 strategies for row player, 2 strategies for column player. If your game happens to be 2 by 2 and it is not a stable game, that is, you cannot find out a saddle point using minimax for column player and maximum for row player, then you come here for unstable games. In unstable, if your game happens to be 2 by 2, then I have two methods. Oddment method, my personal favorite, and then there is algebraic method. You could use either of these. Probably more often than not, you will also be making use of oddment method only. So, when you come down to unstable games, for 2 by 2 we have learnt oddment method and algebraic method. So, if my game is of size of order 2 by 2, I can definitely solve it. But what happens if my game is more than 2 by 2? That is, it is m by n. What do I do now? If your game happens to be m by n, there is a limitation to me that I cannot solve a game of size m by n. I cannot solve an unstable game of size m by n. I can solve a stable game of any size you give me. But for unstable, I only know how to solve a game of size 2 by 2. If you give me a game of order m by n, an unstable game of order m by n, I cannot solve it. This is it. Now, if I cannot solve a game of order m by n, then what do? We have to solve it. What we do is, we try to reduce it. The game of order m by n will be reduced it to 2 by 2. So, if I come across a game of size m by n or n by n, whatever it is, I will try to reduce it. And if it is reduced to 2 by 2, then I can solve it using either of these methods. So, the idea is, if you get a larger game, you go ahead and reduce it. How does that reduction take place? Through dominance. What is dominance? Dominance is, you beat the other player in all compartments, in any field. In cricket, when one team dominates the other, it means that they dominated the batting, they dominated the fielding, they dominated the bowling, they dominated the decision making, they dominated in all compartments. That is domination. If I do good batting, but I am not so good in bowling and fielding, then it is not dominance. If I am good in fielding and batting, but my bowling is not good, it is not dominance. If I am good in A1, A2, A3, but my A4 is not good, that is not dominance. Dominance is, you beat the other player on all fronts. You do not give the other player even a single chance to stand. That is known as dominance. What do we mean by dominance in games? This is the method that we will be using to reduce. So, we will be making use of dominance. Fine. Now, dominance could be of two types. You could have pure dominance, or you could have mixed or average dominance. It is actually mixed dominance. We also call it average dominance. So, either you could have pure dominance, or you could have a mix of some dominance, an average kind of dominance. That is the idea. So, the idea is, if you get a stable game, go ahead and solve it. If you get an unstable game of 2 by 2, go ahead and solve it using oddment method or algebraic method. If you get a game of m by n, that is a game larger than 2 by 2, you reduce it. You reduce it and bring it down to 2 by 2. Once it is down to 2 by 2, I can solve it using oddment method or algebraic method. How do I reduce it? I reduce it using dominance. What is dominance in game theory? What do we mean by dominance in game theory? In cricket, dominance is dominate all fields. In market, dominance is dominance in every single product. Every single mobile that I launch, it dominates the market. In high price segment, in mid price segment, in low price segment. In all segments, my mobile phones are selling more. That is dominance. If I am dominating the high price segment, like iPhone does, iPhone is not able to dominate the market. The reason being, it is not able to dominate the mid price and low price segment. Okay, it can dominate the 70, 80,000, 1 lakh rupee segment, but it is not able to dominate the 25, 35,000 rupee segment. It is not able to dominate the 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 segment. Why is Samsung a dominant player? Because it is able to dominate the high price segment up to 1 lakh, more than 1 lakh. It is able to dominate the 25, 35,000 rupee segment. It is able to dominate the 10,000, 15,000 segment. If you talk of Xiaomi phones, Xiaomi is able to dominate the low price segment, but it is not doing so well in high price segment. If you talk of iPhone, it is doing very well in high price segment, but it is not able to do well in low price segment. So that is the issue with dominance. Dominance is beating at all ends. So what is dominance in game theory? Let us take a very small example. We'll not try to exactly solve it. Let us take a very small example. Suppose A has two alternatives, A1 and A2, while B has B1, B2 and B3. There are three alternatives with B. Look very carefully. If we have this kind of game, what is happening? If I talk of A, row player, listen very carefully, I am talking of row player. For row player, these are gains, these are good values. Row player likes larger values. For column player, these are losses. For row player, these are gains. A gain of 11 rupees, a gain of 10 rupees, a gain of 9 rupees. But for B, it is loss. I gain 11 customers, it means B is losing 11 customers. I gain 9 customers, it means B is losing 9 customers. So for row player, these are gains. For column player, these are losses. Now, look very carefully. Forget about everything. If A had these two choices, only these two choices, which choice would A pick? Would it select 4 rupees or 10 rupees? 4 units or 10 units? We are talking from A's perspective, we are talking from row player's perspective. Which choice will A pick? Obviously, A will pick 10. This is giving me better results. It is better to score 10 runs as compared to 4 runs. Now let me shift my focus to this combination, 8 and 11. If in this universe, I had only these two possible outcomes, A1 and A2, with 8 and 11, which outcome will I pick? I would go with 11. Can we check for this? If in this universe I had only these two outcomes, A1 and A2, with returns 9 and 10, which outcome would I prefer? I would prefer this 10 outcome. Now look very carefully what is happening. In A1, A2, I am picking A2. Again in A1, A2, I am picking A2. Again in A1, A2, I am picking A2. The idea is, the thing is, if B goes with B1, I select A2. If B goes with, what was this? B1, B2 and B3. If B selects B1, I pick A2. If B selects B2, I pick A2. If B selects B3, I pick A2. It means A2 is dominating A1. I'm never picking A1. So from A's perspective, from my perspective, these returns are irrelevant. Because A2 is always giving me better returns than A1. Whatever decision B might be taking, B may jump to B1, B2, B3, wherever B might jump. For me, A2 is always giving me better returns as compared to A1. This is what we mean by dominance. Are we able to get the idea? If we write it down in theory, it would be compare rows and the row with all values larger than the other dominates the other. Compare rows. Now, this is theory. You can always read this in books. Compare rows and the row with all values larger dominates the other. A row, if there is a row which has values greater than all other values, respective values. Of course, we always talk of respective values. If a row has such values that they are larger than the other, then such a row is said to be dominating the other. In this case, what I will be saying is A2 has dominated A1. A2 has dominated A1. Why? Whatever choice B is taking, B1, B2, B3, I am always sticking with A2. This is what we mean by dominance. This was dominance for row player. Now, can we talk of dominance for column player? Compare rows and the row with all values larger than the other, dominates the other. Similarly, we can say compare columns and the column with all values smaller than the other, dominates the other. So we say, in this case, compare the rows and the row with larger value dominates, because row player, for row player, these are gains. The larger the gains, the better I am off. So the larger value dominates. Whereas when we talk of columns, compare columns and the column with all values smaller than the other dominates. For columns, these are losses. So smaller losses dominate the larger losses. Let us take an example. Now, let us say we have these kind of values. Now, I wish to check, is there any dominance at level of columns? So, if B had only two alternatives in this universe, what were those alternatives? B1 and B2. And both were 4s. So I could pick B1, I could pick B2. It hardly matters to me. Both are giving me a loss of 4. For now, I am keeping my opinion reserved. I am not saying that I will be picking B1 or I will be picking B2. I am keeping my opinion reserved. Because I could go with B1, I could go with B2. I will go wherever I get better returns. So, let us talk of A2 now. Suppose there were only two strategies for B. In this complete universe, B had only these two alternatives. What would B prefer? A loss of 6 or a loss of 5? Obviously, B would prefer a loss of 5. Last case, B prefers smaller values. Because these are losses, smaller the loss, better B is off. A loss of 3 or a loss of -1. -1, loss of -1 is actually a gain of 1. So what would you prefer? A loss of 3 or a gain of 1? Obviously, I will prefer gain of 1. So what do we see? That if 6 and 5 are the outcomes, I am sticking with B2. If 3 and -1 are outcomes, I am sticking with B2. And if 4 and 4 are outcomes, I could go either with B1 or I could go with B2. What I will do is, I will go with B2. Why would I go with B2? Because in such case, B2 has dominated B1. In these two, I am going with this. 6 and 5, I am going with 5. Here I had a choice. I could go with B1, I could go with B2. If I go with B1, my game will remain of size m by n. Nothing is reduced. But if I go with B2, from these 4s, both are similar. if I select this 4, it means that B1 has been dominated. Whenever it boils down to B1 and B2, I am always selecting B2. I am never selecting B1. So I can say that if A goes with A1, I'll stick with B2. If A goes to A2, I'll stick with B2. If A goes to A3, I'll stick with B2. So in either case, I'm sticking with B2. So now I can say this time that B2 has dominated B1. Column with smaller values will dominate. These are the smaller values. This was equal, so I selected according to my convenience, the one which was giving me ease of operation. So this is what we mean by domination. How do we compare? We compare rows and columns. Is that fine? Then this was something about pure dominance. When we talk of dominance, if you do not get clear-cut dominance, then what do? Then you go for mixed dominance. Mixed dominance or average dominance is where we compare, where we team up, where we pair up two strategies and field them against another strategy. We'll take an example. Now, let us see if there are any pure dominances. A1 against A2, A1 against A3, A1 against A2, A1 against A3. If you get something in A1, A2, fine. Otherwise, check A1 against A3. If you get anything in A1 against A3, fine. Otherwise, move to next combination, that is A2 against A3. Let me check. 4 and 0. Where would you like to go? In 4 and 0, I will stick with 4. Why? Because I am comparing A1 against A2. A1 against A2. So, in row comparison, I go with the larger value. 4 and 0, I will stick with 4. 0 and 2, I will go with 2. So, there is no question of a dominance over here because at times I am going with A1, at times I am going with A2. Case closed. There is no dominance in A1 against A2. Then we have A1 against A3. A1 against A3. 4 and 10 I will go with 10. 0 and 4 I will go with 4. But in 7 and 8 I will go with 8. So again, in A1 against A3 there is no dominance whatsoever. Then last case is A2 against A3. A2 against A3. 0 against 10, 10 is the larger value. We are comparing rows still. A2 is a row, A3 is a row. So when you are comparing rows, you take the larger values. Why? Because this game is plotted again according to the row player. This is a row player game. This data is row player data. These are gains for row player. So when you are comparing rows, the gains should be larger. 0 against 10, 10 is better gain. 2, 4, 4 is better, but in 10, 7, 10 is better. So again, I can say that there is no dominance in A2 against A3. So the idea is, as soon as you get a question, you should check for stability. If it is a stable game, very good. If it is not a stable game, check if it is a 2 by 2 game. If it is a 2 by 2 game, solve using oddment or algebraic. If it is not 2 by 2, if it is m by n, then reduce it. How do you reduce it? Using dominance. In dominance also, first check for pure dominance. This was pure or absolute. Pure dominance or absolute dominance. One against other. Pure dominance, absolute dominance. One against one. But if you are not able to find any pure dominance, if you are not able to find pure dominance and reduce it, then we need to go to mixed or average dominance. How do we go about average dominance? We form teams. We will club strategies. We will combine strategies and pit them against the other strategy. What do we mean by that? I'll combine A1 and A2 and pit it against A3. A1, A2 playing against A3. If this gives you result, very good. Otherwise, A1, A3 against. So, A1, A2 is a team against A3. If you don't get anything, A1, A3 becomes a team against A2. Still, if you don't get anything, A2, A3 will form a team against A1. Fine. So, you see that the teams that were battling it out in pure dominance, this time they will be making a team and battling it against the single team. So, first case is A1, A2 against A3. These are combinations. This is the process for mixed or average dominance. Mixed dominance or average. See, when we study literature from books, different authors from East, from Western countries, they'll make use of different terminology. So, at times you could come across pure or absolute dominance, at times they'll call it mixed dominance or average dominance. We should understand the core concept. In numerical subjects, it is important to understand the concept so that I can use that concept. In any case, mixed or average, A1 and A2 combined, A1, A2 combined, 4 and 0 combined, A1 and A2 combined against A1, A2 combined against A3. Now, one thing is there, 4 plus 0. If two teams are combining, there is a high likelihood that they will defeat the third team. Because two are coming together, gains of two strategies. The gains from first strategy, gains from second strategy, if they are added, obviously there is a high likelihood that they might be more than the third strategy. So, what I will do is, I will not take the gains exactly, direct addition, rather I will take averages. So, 4 and 0, 4 and 0 is 4 plus 0, average would be 2, 0 plus 2, average would be 1, 10 plus 8, 18, average would be 9. So, for A1, A2, the average scores are 2, 1 and 9, 2 coming from here, 1 from here and 9 from here, while A3 is 10, 4 and 7. From 2 and 10, where do you go? 10. From 1 and 4, where do you go? 4. From 9 and 7, where do you go? 9. So, do we see any kind of dominance? No, there is no dominance at all. At times A3 is winning, at times A1, A2 is winning. So, there is no dominance at all. And yes, one more thing. How do we decide upon dominance? In A1, A2, we understand dominance is decided upon larger values. But how do we decide about dominance over here? There are clear-cut rules. If combination wins, then the single strategy is out. But if single strategy wins, you could have this case or you could have second case. Either this can win, either none of these will win. So, there is no dominance. But if there is dominance and combination wins, then single strategy is kicked out. But if single strategy wins, what about this? Whom do I blame? Do I blame A2? Do I blame A3? Who should go out? Who should leave the ground? A2 or A3? Because A1 has won. Who should we leave out? A2 or A3? So, we cannot leave A2 or A3, either one out. So, this is a case which is not dominance. So, in mixed or average dominance, you should check if the combination is winning against single, that is the only case where we call it a dominance. The combination should dominate single strategy. If single strategy dominates the combination, then it is not a dominance. Because I am confused. If A1 dominates A2, A3, I am confused. Whom do I leave out? A2 or A3? How can I say A2 that you leave? A2 will fight against me. Why are you not removing A3? So, what I do is, if the combination dominates A1, there is no one to blame, A1 should move out. But if the single team dominates the combination, then it is not termed as a dominance. Dominance is when the combination dominates single. In any case, there was no dominance over here. So when I talk of A1, A2 against A3, there is no dominance. When I talk of A1, A3 against A2, when I talk of A1, A3 against A2, this time A1 and A3 will be combined. 4 plus 10, 14, making an average of 7. 4 plus 0, 4, average of 2. 7 and 8, 15, average of 7.5. Against scores of 0, 2 and 10. 7 and 0, who wins? 7 wins. 2 and 2, I'll keep my opinion reserved. I could go with a combination or I could go with this one. 7.5 and 10, I go with 10. So again, I am in a situation where at times A1, A3 is dominating, at times A2 is winning. Not dominating, winning. A1, A3 is winning, here A2 is winning. So there is no case of dominance over here again. A2 against A3. A2, A3 against A1. A2, A3 are combining against A1. A2, A3 are combining, 0 and 10 are combining 5, 2 and 4 are combining 6, that is 3, 10 and 7 is 17, that is 8.5, and then you have a 4, 0 and 8. From 5 and 4, we'll go with 5, from 3 and 0, I'll go with 3, from 8.5 and 8, I'll go with 8.5. So, in this case, I can say A2, A3 are dominating A1. So, I say A2, A3 have dominated A1. A2, A3 have dominated A1, and I can very conveniently remove A1. So, after 6 stages of comparison, A1 against A2, A1 against A3, A2 against A3, A1, A2 against A3, A1, A3 against A2, A2, A3 against A1, in final comparison, one strategy has been removed. At least from one side, I am down to 2. This can continue with columns also. Fine. So, I believe this lecture has gone a bit longer. So, we will continue in the next lecture, and there we will take certain proper questions so that we could learn from those questions. This was a concept. Concept was when you are comparing rows, the larger value is selected because rows are gains, and when you are comparing columns, lower value is selected. So, for pure dominance, comparing rows, pick the larger. Comparing columns, pick the smaller. In average or mixed dominance, combine teams with average scores and make them play against the single one. Combine teams with averages, make them play against the single one. If the combination dominates the single, that is dominance, and single is out. But if the single dominates the combination, it is not called dominance. There is no dominance. So, in this case, there is only one-way dominance. In this case, A1 could have dominated A2, A2 could have dominated A1. But here, only A2, A3 can dominate A1. A1 can never dominate A2, A3. So, this was it for opening up the dominance topic. Now, we are slowly advancing into unstable games and larger unstable games of M by M. And until we meet next time with some more questions, do take care. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.